Welcome to the Deliciously Simple Food channel. I'm Shelly, and I would love it if you came and cooked with me today. Come on! Welcome back! I'm so glad you joined me. We're gonna cook up a storm today because today, on this cold winter day, we're gonna be making a vegan cream of mushroom soup. Now, this cream of mushroom soup is going to taste so fantastic, you're not gonna buy cream of mushroom soup in a can again. So let me give you a lowdown of all the ingredients that we've got going on here. So the first bit of ingredients we've got going on here are the mushrooms and the vegetable broth. The next bit of ingredients that we have is the soy milk, the cashews, and a half a cup of all-purpose flour. The next ingredients that's going to go in this pot is the potatoes and the onions. And lastly, we've got a bit of spices. So I'll talk about the spices a little bit later as we go along, but before we get started on why we're using some of the ingredients, let me get this potato into the pot of boiling water that we have behind me here. Now you're probably wondering why I'm putting potatoes in the cream of mushroom soup and why I'm putting some of the ingredients that I'm putting in. So let's give you a lowdown of regular cream of mushroom soup. Normally you would use heavy cream in there, or you would use sort of an animal-based milk. And that's gonna give it the body, that's gonna give it the texture, that's gonna give it the creaminess, and a little bit of the silkiness from the oils that you're going to use to saute the onions and so on. But instead of using animal products such as like the heavy cream or the milks, we're going to be using vegetable broth, but we're also going to be using soy milk and cashews and potatoes. Now when you overcook potatoes, they start to disintegrate, and all of these sort of fibers in the potatoes starts to sort of, mesh in and blend in with whatever meal that you're cooking. And that's what we're going for in this soup. We want the potatoes to sort of blend in well and give it that little body. Now the cashews and the soy milk that we're going to be using today, that's going to be blended together. And the act of blending the cashews and the soy milk is going to give it that sort of creamy texture, that sort of richness and taste. And just when you blend the cashews, it creates sort of the oils that you need to give it that silky flavor in the soup. So that's why we're using some of the ingredients that we're using. Now this is a heart-healthy meal, which means that we're going to be using vegetable broth to saute the onions and to saute the mushrooms instead of using oil or butter. And any person who wants to be oil-free and cook things without oil, this is the meal for you, because we're going to be doing everything here oil-free, and we're only going to be adding a little bit of salt in the end for taste. So come along with me and let's get started cooking this meal. So the first things that we're going to do is I'm going to put a little bit of vegetable broth in each of the pots behind me, and then I'm going to bring you in so you can see the mushrooms going into the pot and you can see how we're going to saute the onions. So come on over. Okay, so you're up close and personal with me here by the stove, and the first things that we're going to do is we're going to throw our onions in the pot that we're going to actually make the soup with. Now I've already thrown in here a quarter cup of vegetable broth, and we're going to saute the onions in the pot with the vegetable broth here. And this is going to provide sort of that sort of salty flavor, that vegetable flavor that's going to go in. And if you find that the vegetable broth is evaporating, just add a little bit more and keep adding a little bit more vegetable broth until the onions are sauteed. The next thing that we're going to do here is we're going to add some mushrooms in the pot. So the potatoes are boiling nicely over there. We've got the mushrooms in a separate pot on its own, and we also have the onions in this pot that I'm stirring, and it's being sauteed. Now we're sauteing the onions with vegetable broth, and I put about half a cup of vegetable broth in here that's boiling, and it's sauteing the onions, and that's going to give it that rich vegetable flavor. In the separate pot here, we have the mushrooms cooking, And I want to cook the mushrooms in a separate pot because I want to be able to blend the mushrooms before I put it in the soup pot. So this is going to cook down nicely. And so I'm going to continue to bring you back and forth to the pot so you can see how things are progressing. Now these mushrooms are progressing nicely, and you can see that by adding the vegetable broth, it's cooking them down, and the mushrooms are going to release its own moisture as well. So as the mushrooms release its own moisture, it's going to be in the pot and it's going to be simmering the mushrooms as it goes. Now we're not going to throw away anything in this pot. With the liquid from the mushrooms and the liquid from the vegetable broth, when it's time to blend up our mushrooms, we're going to be putting everything in the blender and we're going to be blending it up together. The onions are sauteing nicely, and at this point we're going to put in our thyme seasoning. Now this green seasoning here is about a teaspoon of a thyme blend. Whatever thyme blends that you have, put it in. So my thyme blend is thyme, oregano, rosemary. I just put a teaspoon of that, but if you put a teaspoon of your Italian dressing with thyme seasoning in there, it'll taste just as good. Now we're seeing the onions start to stick a little bit because the vegetable broth has evaporated. So we're just going to come in and put a little bit more vegetable broth in there. Now, all the ingredients, including the spices, are in the pot, and the soup's cooking. It's probably going to take another 15 minutes or so. And I've got a little bit of mushrooms left over that I didn't blend to add as a garnish on top of the mushrooms. And so we're just going to let that cook, and then we're going to plate, and then we're going to be right back to taste our soup. Okay, now that our soup is done, let's go ahead and plate up so you can see exactly what the soup looks like, and then we'll get to eat this amazing soup. Oh, this looks amazing. Our soup is done. I've garnished it with a little bit of the mushrooms that have been left over, some wakame, which I believe is just dried seaweed, and just a little bit of spinach leaves here. And so along with the bread and the broccoli and the beets, we have such a balanced diet here. And this meal is chock full of B12. The portobello mushrooms that we used have B12, and in addition to that, the soy milk is fortified with B12. And so if you're like me and you're always wondering, where am I going to get my B12? Well, mushroom soup made with soy milk is the way to go. Now, this looks absolutely tasty. So let me go ahead and taste it here and see what it tastes like. As you can see here, as I put my spoon in, I've got a little bit of chunks of potatoes still left. I've got, some of the seaweed here that we're going to sort of crush up. And seaweed is fantastic is a fantastic source of iodine. And so just going to take a little bit of the seaweed, a little bit of potatoes, and hopefully I got some onions in there. Yes, so hearty, so creamy. And I've really blended up these mushrooms really well. Now, if you're not the kind of person to want to blend up all of your mushrooms and you want a little bit of that texture, then go ahead and don't blend it up as much as I did. But this is a fantastic soup that I can make every winter, almost every other week. And so I hope you enjoyed. If you like this episode, please like it, give it a thumbs up, subscribe, and click the notification bell. And we'll see you in the next episode.